Hey there, friends. Jeff Fritz here, and I've got some more great Blazor content for you. This time, let's talk about getting data into our Blazor application from a microservice, from some sort of HTTP endpoint that lives outside of our application. Maybe it's a cloud service like Azure Search or Azure Functions that we're going to query, interact with. Maybe we send data back into and have Blazor respond appropriately. How do we do that? Well, fortunately, there's a really great sample that's embedded inside the Blazor templates, and it's the fetch data page. This is a very simple page that's been built that also showcases a very important concept, the concept of dependency injection. We're going to see how we can inject an HTTP client that will allow us to fetch and interact with data from those services outside of our Blazor application. Let's go over and take a look a little bit deeper at the fetch data sample and extend it a little bit so that we can do some other interactions with our data.
All right, let's take a look at the fetch data sample that comes with our Blazor templates. This is available with every template, whether it's WebAssembly or Blazor Server. And the features that you see here are the same in both environments. The code on the right, it's presenting, and you see in the browser, it is presenting a nice table of some randomly generated weather forecast. It's a table, but it's been built from data fetched from the server. Take a look at the code here on the left inside of Visual Studio, and you can see it's injecting a weather forecast service object. Now that's interesting. That's something that we haven't seen before. This is dependency injection, and we've had the ability to use the inject keyword inside of Razor templates previously, but now we're using it inside of a Blazor page or a Blazor component to inject dependent features and services that we want to use inside of our page. If we scroll down inside of our page here, you'll see it uses the weather forecast service to get a forecast asynchronously for a specific time. Show me the forecast for the next 5 days. And that's what it's doing right there. It's able to reach into that weather forecast service because it's been injected into our component. The code for it isn't here, it's elsewhere in our application. And in this template, using the Blazor server-side template, inside my startup class, just like in a regular ASP.NET Core application, I have a configure services method, and there you see it's added a singleton for the weather forecast service. And the weather forecast service is just simply returning a collection of these faux forecasts that are going to be painted on the screen. That's easy to do. That's easy to interact with, to get data and have it loaded into our application. We've got a clear service that is going to work for us here inside of our Blazor server-side application. But when I'm running Blazor with WebAssembly, I need to fetch data from somewhere else, from some web-enabled endpoint, and bring it back to the browser. The sandbox rules of the browser apply, and the only way that I can get data into the browser and into my Blazor WebAssembly application is through making a web request. And we can do that by making a request using an HTTP client to get data and return it to our Blazor WebAssembly application. If I want to get data from the server and paint it into my Blazor component, I can use an HTTP client to do that interaction. I've created a controller that will return the exact same forecast here from our weather forecast service at an API endpoint that we can take a look at real quick. So if I fetch data from API/forecast, I'll get that same set of weather forecast information. Let's wire this up with an HTTP client injected into our fetch data Razor template. First, I'll go into the startup file And I'll add a service so that we can register that HTTP client for us to interact with. I'll go back over to the fetch data razor file. And now I'll inject that HTTP client that we're going to work with. Next, I'll go to the bottom of the file. And instead of the forecast getting forecasts asynchronously from the forecast service, I'll use the HTTP client to fetch it from that API endpoint. I'll fetch my weather forecast now by specifying forecasts equals await HTTP dot get from JSON async, and I'm going to be returning an IEnumerable collection of weather forecasts from HTTPS localhost 5001 API forecast. Now, I need to change the interaction here. We're not getting an array of forecasts. We're getting an IEnumerable of those. So I'll change that. Save. And it updates on the right and shows me the exact same content. It's now fetching it using an HTTP request from the server. Now, this is a server-side application. It's using an HTTP client fetch. This is much more accurate in use if you're inside of a Blazor WebAssembly application, but you could certainly use this approach to interact with microservices that live behind the firewall, because this HTTP get from JSON async we see on line 46 is actually firing on the server, not inside the browser. In this case, because this is a Blazor server-side application. So you have the ability to work with microservices and inject HTTP clients in your Blazor pages and components to interact with those as well. Maybe you want to interact with an Azure search service or an Azure function. You can do that using this HTTP client injection technique. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy this Blazor video. I've got a bunch more of them in the queue, and I hope you tune in to watch the next one.